Thank you so much for everything everybody is doing and for the wonderful presentations and for explaining to everybody what you guys have been working on for such a long time. I did have a couple of questions about the JE vaccine and the presentation with that earlier, and I just wanted to, you guys aren't able to answer the questions, but I wanted to give a comment and maybe a line of thought to see what your thoughts would be on that. So my understanding is that there were 12 cases of JE in about a 19-year span. So in those 12 cases, that boils down to less than one case per year. So if we're looking at that, you also mentioned that the death rate in JE is 33% in one case. So in less than one case per year, the possibility of dying is about 33% of that. So, you know, the purpose and the idea behind vaccines is to save lives. So I'm going to focus on the high risk group, which is the risk group 1, which is recommended for all travelers staying over a month, and also focusing on the death on that as well. So, 12 cases over the course of 19 years, 33% chance of dying in that less than one case. So in that situation, it would take 2,230,284 people to be vaccinated to save that potential one life. So if we're looking at that, and then we also look at the cost standpoint at the higher rate, and I apologize, I don't have that number down here, but I'm sure, $292 per vaccine, you're looking at $651,242,928 to potentially save that 1/3 of one life, less than one life, who's actually contracting JE, you know, in that possible year. So we're looking at that cost, and then even with the reduced cost of vaccine at $131 per vaccine, then you're looking at $292,167,204 of vaccinating that number of people to potentially save that one life that might get it in 1 year. So, so we're looking at that as far as cost goes. And then one other thing I wanted to point out is that you mentioned that there are 64,000 cases of JE in Asia that have not been vaccinated. And two things. Number one, we're looking at a population of, I think, 4 or 5 billion people. So the chances of them even getting it not being vaccinated, we figured out is 0.000, there's like 5 zeros. So the chance of them getting it is extremely, extremely rare, even without the vaccination. And then as you mentioned, the people that are in that area, they receive natural immunity from the symptoms of getting it whenever they do get it. So I wanted to mention those two things. And then the next aspect of it, you mentioned the boosters. We're not really sure how efficacious it is. And I noticed that the efficacy really went down as far as the number of boosters. It definitely doesn't, it wears off, it doesn't last. So when you're looking at people to return to this country and possibly getting the disease, then my question becomes, wouldn't it be better for them, if they even get it, to achieve natural immunity through getting those, you know, basic symptoms, and then they have their immunity for a lifetime, versus maybe getting a booster shot or not getting a booster shot. So I wanted to present that as one idea. And then the second idea, in looking at the study, you're comparing vaccine to vaccine as far as the safety profile and the adverse events. So my first thought is, if you're comparing to those two vaccines, I would want to know from the second vaccine, what's the safety event profile on that vaccine in comparison to an inert saline placebo, and comparing it in that way, because we don't really know, like, what if this vaccine has a ton of adverse events? You know, we're not really looking at how safe this vaccine is if we're comparing it to another vaccine that could potentially cause a lot of adverse events. So basically, at the end of the day, like, I understand that this might be an inconvenient illness for that less than one person, you know, maybe a year, that might get it, that really is probably not going to die from it. but is this vaccine even needed? I mean, is it even necessary? And to go through the cost of having to produce this and then to require or recommend, strongly recommend for that class 1 of people that's staying over there for a month to get this vaccine when we don't even really know the safety profile of it because you're just comparing it to another vaccine, that's a lot of unanswered questions. And when you're looking at the general public, when they're going to this other country and they're being told, you might get this, you might get this, you might get this, they're just going to, follow suit. And we really don't know the safety profile, and the disease is really not a big deal. So I just wanted to see if not vaccinating would be an option.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Ms. Andrea Woodruff.
Hi, and thank you. With the Center for Disease Control organization, I've always been pretty impressed with, but I'm starting to really doubt how much we can control disease. I think at best we can manage it. I've been watching data issues, been asking for models, but I haven't gotten them. I've been reading about strain replacement, recombination of viruses, recombination of bacteria, contamination issues, manufacturing issues. These things seem to be out of our control. I think we can try to manage and we can report what is being found, but it ultimately comes down to my choice as a person and as a parent, what my data points are and what I'm seeing. And I'd love to hear your information, and I'm grateful that you provide it. But I don't think we can control it. I think we need to look at these things a little differently. Thank you so much. Take care.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Hastings, and I'm in here on my own in my private capacity, paying my own expenses. And I really appreciate the opportunity to have this public comment. And at the risk of beating a drum and making music that no one wants to listen to, I hope to narrow my comment a little bit today. So my guess is that probably everyone in this room understands the priority and significance of breastfeeding. Some of you theoretically, and some of you have had personal experience, either yourself or someone close to you, with a breastfeeding mom and baby, a healthy diet, just getting it right. Well, as a breastfeeding counselor, trying to help thousands of moms over 25 years, I often see moms really struggle, and some of their main struggles have to do early on with latching, and that often prevents them from developing a good milk supply. And so over the years, I've looked at this and I've noticed, and I've read some studies that point a correlation between early Hep B vaccine and difficulty with breastfeeding. And non-vaccinated babies often do better with breastfeeding. And so could early hepatitis B, that birth dose, be playing a role in sabotaging the breastfeeding of newborns? Further, Dr. Yao's study using animal models notes a long-term impact on the brains of mice that received early vaccination with Hep B. And that caused a neurobehavioral impairments, not right away, but in early adulthood. So the original Hep B studies prior to the inclusion on the schedule tracked infants for less than 2 weeks. Amongst a growing incidence of anxiety, violence, and social disorders amongst the youth in our country today, it is no small thing to review the long-term impact that this routine shot may be having on our children. I understand there are many branches in the CDC, and you're all looking at various aspects of health. And I'm sure you have specialists who are working to improve breastfeeding rates and trying to understand the anxiety, depression, violence, and suicide rates amongst youth, and increase communication amongst these various branches of the CDC may increase our understanding of the complex, non-specific effects that could be associated with vaccines. And for the layperson, that's unintended consequences. So the vaccine schedule currently has 3 categories to which physicians refer regarding administration of Hep B. Positive mothers, negative mothers, and mothers of unknown status. I would suggest that to delay the hepatitis B vaccine for negative mothers, at least until breastfeeding is well established, would be a great idea. And I'd also like to have more representation in your working groups from people who are studying non-specific effects, experts such as Dr. Christopher Exley, Dr. Teresa Deischer, Dr. Mawson. These people can inform your working groups just as you currently have the pharmaceutical industries representing their work and their studies in your working groups. And I think that will give you the evidence base. Many have said here today, you don't have enough evidence. You are making decisions without evidence. Well, there is evidence available, and I think if you access it, it will be better for everyone. Thank you.
My name is Lynette Barron. I'm here representing my children. I have 2 vaccine-injured children. I had no idea vaccine injury was even a possibility. I have 5 kids. Always followed the schedule. My 3 oldest ones that I didn't, never even imagined it could happen. When my 4-year-old was 15 months old, I took her to the doctor for thrush. I did not take her in for vaccinations that day. I took her in because she was sick. The doctors told me that my child had to get vaccinations that day. And I told them I did not think this was a great idea because she was in there for thrush, which I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, but I have, Google, I can read that means your immune system is down. But they kept telling me that if my child was able, would get something that she could have had that would have been prevented by those vaccines, then I would be in trouble. So that I needed to go ahead and do this that day. So my daughter got 6 vaccines that day, 2 were triples. From that day forward, we went through 26 days straight of fever. We spent 7 weeks in children in Birmingham. We had bone marrow aspiration and biopsies. We went through all kinds of, anyway, sorry, it's just really hard when you're a parent and you have to go through this. I give my daughter Neupogen injections now every 3 days of her life, and I have ever since this happened. 2 weeks prior to her injury, I cut my finger. 2 tiny little stitches is what I needed. I was 26 weeks pregnant, and I was told that I had to have a Tdap vaccine. I received that Tdap vaccine. Her 2-year-old sister has severe autism, global development delay, epilepsy, gut issues. The list goes on and on. I can't even tell you how many diagnoses this child has received, and she's not even 3 years old yet. I have 5 kids. My kids, my older kids didn't get a schedule like this, and we didn't see problems like this. The schedule keeps growing and keeps growing and keeps growing, and you're creating people like me. I don't want to have to know all this vaccine science. I don't want to have to read every book about this stuff, every medical journal. I'm a mother. Seriously, I have turned my entire life around in order to try to help other people avoid the same pain my family has to go through. And if y'all had all the proper science, like this sweet woman just said, from actual scientists other than just the people who are being paid to do these things, pharmaceutical companies aren't thinking about people like me. They're not thinking about those children who don't need to be vaccinated again. They're not thinking about, I'm sitting next to Paul Offit earlier, the same man who says if you're not going to vaccinate your children, they should be taken by the state. I will never vaccinate my children again, and the state will not come take my children because I will fight tooth and nail for my kids. This is not the way this should be. You shouldn't feel pressure to do something like this. You should have all the proper information. If y'all don't have all the science, then how will we have all the science? It just doesn't make any sense. I really hope that I will be at every meeting that comes. I will be right here. I really hope that things start getting better and the science actually starts improving, because the saddest part is I hear more data that makes more sense about what's going on everywhere else than I do in this room. So I just really hope that actually improves for people like us who we don't want to have to do this. We don't want to be in your space, in your face. I want to be at home with my children. I had to pay over $500 to make this trip today to come here from out of state just to talk to you guys, to let you know We don't want to be, forced to do these things, or we don't want to be told it's okay when they're sick. It's okay, we do this all the time, it's not going to do anything. And if you don't want to do it and something happens to them, then you're responsible. Who's responsible when something happens to my children? Nobody, because they deny them from vaccine injury compensation program. Nobody cares. They don't want to hear your story. They don't want to hear it. They told me, find my own expert, find my own lawyers. How do I find my own experts? Somebody please tell me that. I mean, it's just insane. The system is not set up to help people. It's damaging, and it's just, it needs to stop.
Thank you.
Hello again, Tia Severino. I just want to say the hepatitis B vaccine was one of the vaccines that injured my son. When he was brought to me after a 5-hour delay after an emergency C-section, he could not latch. He could not nurse. I ended up having to supplement, even though it was my desire to exclusively breastfeed him. I thought I was going to take the cautionary approach to vaccinations. He only received 4 vaccines. 4 individual separate vaccines separated by 3 to 4 weeks. And he still ended up injured, okay? I'm sitting here listening to you guys talk about a shortage in the hepatitis B vaccine for newborns. And I, for the life of me, cannot understand why you are recommending this vaccine for a sexually transmitted disease for day 1 old infants. And I would like to point out for this panel that the United States has the highest day 1 infant mortality rate in the world. Why? We're supposed to have the best medical system in the world. Why are more babies dying the first day of life here in this country? Why do we have the highest rates of infant mortality? We have the highest vaccination rates. We should not have children dying. Babies go in at 2, 4, and 6 months and are routinely injected with up to 23 antigens. I'm standing right here representing a friend of mine named Priscilla and her husband Will, whose daughter died after receiving her 4-month vaccines. This was determined to be caused by vaccines. Now, with the hepatitis B vaccine, by the time my son is sexually active, guess what? That vaccine's not going to be protecting him. It lasts maybe 8 to 10 years. So you're telling me that I needed to inject my newborn child with a sexually transmitted disease vaccine that it's going to wear off before he's ever even sexually active? It makes no sense to me. If you guys are worried about a shortage in hepatitis B vaccines, why don't you just stop giving them to babies? Then you'll have more to go around. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I think we've completed all that signed up for public comment, and I think that we've completed the June 2018 ACIP meeting. Thank you all so much.